Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar on why Melbourne is the place for Malaysians to study, build a career and do business. In addition to the registered participants, and the webinar will be recorded this afternoon to allow for wide distribution over coming weeks and months. Thank you for those attending today and those who are watching the recording. We really do appreciate your interest, involvement and engagement. And we're very excited to have Panchali, Tina and the team from the Study Melbourne Hub in Kuala Lumpur here today as well. The hub, which opened in late 2021, is a fantastic, vibrant space for international students, current, future and alumni, studying or looking to study with Victorian education. The Study Hub provides networking events and activities, access to support services and programs, and is a place where you can learn more about studying in Melbourne, make new friends and thrive as an international student. A fantastic initiative in strengthening connections between Malaysia and Melbourne. I understand it also has free Wi-Fi, free coffee and free tea. So there's a great plug for Study Melbourne and the hub in KL. And we'll invite them to ask some questions towards the end of today's session. And a really important thank you to our event partners today, Outcome.Life and Study Melbourne. My name is Michael Langhammer. I'm a recently retired partner from Pitcher Partners here in Melbourne after 22 years, retiring 30 June last year. Pitcher Partners is a chartered accounting firm, part of the Baker Tilly International Network. And of course, Baker Tilly in Malaysia is a preeminent firm in the middle market, as is Pitcher Partners here in Australia. Together with Andrew Clarkson, we spearheaded Pitcher Partners' ASEAN strategy with a particular focus on Malaysia for more than a decade. Over that period, we would travel to Malaysia, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Penang, more than twice a year, and built some wonderful friendships and relationships with business people in Malaysia, government officials and individuals over there. And I must say that COVID has made it really tough, having not been able to visit for the last couple of years. And certainly it's a pleasure and a privilege to be asked to moderate today's webinar. We'll talk about the diaspora in terms of Malaysia and Australia, Melbourne and Kuala Lumpur and Penang and other cities and states. But we reached out to 4 individuals to assist with today's webinar, and we got 4 straight yeses. I think that demonstrates part of the culture, the alignment, the friendships and relationships between the 2 countries and what we're doing today. And it's such an esteemed panel, so very excited to be able to have such great panelists today. By way of formal introduction, Jian Lee is the Group General Manager of ST Group, one of the great commercial and business stories here in Melbourne and Australia. He's responsible for introducing Australia and abroad to some of Malaysia's favourite eateries, including Papa Rich restaurants, Nean Chicken, Hokkaido Baked Cheese Tart, Tafu and many more. With now 140 stores across 3 countries, Jian Lee has been pivotal in leading the group to be more innovative and has taken charge over technological developments in the hospitality industry. And I've been to most of those restaurants, Jian.
Thanks.
Great fan. Chi Wei Yong is the Director of Australia from UEM Sunrise Berhad. Welcome, Chi Wei. UEM Sunrise is one of Malaysia's top public listed property developers, focusing on township and property development, inclusive of macro township development, high-rise residential, commercial and integrated development, property management and project construction services. And it successfully completed the iconic Aurora and Conservative projects here in Melbourne, which is a fantastic credit to UEM Sunrise and is such a 2 great defining assets here in Melbourne. Andrew Clarkson is a current partner of Pitcher Partners in the Business Advisory and Assurance Division, specialising in a broad range of industries, but with a strong focus on property and construction. Andrew has extensive experience in advising clients within Australia and overseas. Andrew's role has seen him travel to Kuala Lumpur and Singapore on a quarterly basis to advise clients, and he has been responsible for facilitating numerous cross-border property transactions. Natasha Norden is Assistant Manager at Pitcher Partners. Natasha moved from Malaysia, joining Pitcher Partners in Melbourne as an analyst in 2017. Which is a great story, and we'll dig a bit deeper into Natasha's story. Through Pitcher Partners and Khazanah Nasional's Malaysian cadetship program, and has progressed her career after completing her CA program here with CAANZ to assistant manager within the firm. So a great story as well. There is a questions and answers and chats for any of the attendees who would like to ask some questions. I'll sort of curate that as we go, and to the extent that I can ask some questions of the panelists, I will. well, we'll save some questions and answers towards the end as well. I think in terms of talking about the relationship between Malaysia and Australia, it's really think about some of the facts and figures. At the end of the day, I am an accountant. But the special relationship between Malaysia and Australia is built on many things, including immigration, education, tourism, and of course, commerce. You don't need to scratch the surface too far to realise the breadth and depth of the Malaysian-Australian relationship. It's quite surprising when you research how many famous Australians were born in Malaysia or have Malaysian parents across so many spheres: sports, arts, politics, and of course, commerce and industry. Penny Wong, leader of the Australian Labor Party in the Federal Senate, was born in Malaysia. Singers such as Kamal, for some of the attendees of my age, and probably Australia's most successful artist over the last decade, Guy Sebastian. Malaysia is famous for its food, and we love travelling to Malaysia for the food, and I've missed that the last couple of years. Thanks to ST Group, we get some benefit here in Melbourne. But chefs and household names in Australia, Adam Liao was born in Penang, and Po Ling Yao was born in Kuala Lumpur. A question I noticed for Jian for later. You can give us the verdict on where the best chefs and the best food comes from. Jian, is it KL or is it Penang? And sports stars. There are so many sports stars across so many different sports in Australia that have been born in Malaysia or have Malaysian parents. In fact, tennis, Australia's on my tennis player, Nick Kyrgios's mother is Malaysian, which is not a well-known fact. From a trade perspective, I remember when Andrew and I were really promoting the Malaysian relationship 10 years ago, the free trade agreement was signed in 2012, which is now 10 years ago. And that was part of Julia Gillard's fantastic Asian Century white paper and her initiative there. I think that's 10 years ago and where we've come from then. Australia's population is about 26 million. I think Malaysia, plus or minus 10%, depending on who you ask, is around about 30 million, 32 million. Not massive populations. When you think about the trade between the two countries, it's incredible. Exports in 2020 from Australia to Malaysia were 8.8 billion. Imports from Malaysia to Australia were 10.6 billion. Investment from Australia to Malaysia was 11 billion, and investment from Malaysia into Australia was 19.2 billion. Now, these are very large numbers, but it shows the importance of the two countries to each other and what we're doing. I think it's a relative ease of doing business between the two jurisdictions that make things so easy, and we'll explore some of that, unpack some of that as well. But when we talk about really the bonding of the two countries, it really comes, I think, through the education and students. So pre-COVID, there's been 20,000 Malaysians enrolling in Australian universities every year, which has been pretty consistent over probably the 10 years to 2020. What I wasn't aware of, and what I've become aware of since researching for today's session, is there's 20,000 Malaysians also studying in Australian universities based in Malaysia. So Swinburne, Curtin and Monash have university campuses now in Malaysia. And a number of universities such as RMIT, which has an affiliate in Malaysia, are also operating through various partners such as Sunway. And Andrew and I have been there a couple of times and seen the Sunway University, which is just a fantastic precinct, not far from the centre of KL. The interesting thing too, and what we've seen since COVID, is the online community and the online capacity we have now. So I suspect that number of students both ways will increase even more now through the online education and hybrid learning opportunities as well. And that will no doubt bring Australian Malaysians closer together. It really is quite a remarkable story, the Australian and Malaysian relationship. That's by way of introduction. So I've talked a couple of times about the special relationship between Australia and Malaysia. We might just run around the panelists just for a quick thought starter in terms of a question. What, in your view, has powered this special relationship between Australia and Malaysia? We might start with you, Chu Wei, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. I think it's probably also because of the proximity. That's, I think, one of the key attraction about Australia for Malaysians. I mean, as a student, if you're living, if you are going, say, for education, you're looking for universities and you want to go to a Western country. So for Malaysian students, typically your choices would be either Australia, or you go to the UK, or you go to the US. But because of the proximity, you know, it's just 7-8 hours flight away, and the time difference is only either 2 or 3 hours. So your parents will feel more comforted that, you know, you're almost in the same time zone, not quite, but quite close. So I think that's probably the main attraction, I think. Yeah.
Fantastic. Jian, what do you think? I mean, you studied here at RMIT?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so I did RMIT in accounting as well, but unfortunately, I did not venture into that field. I'm actually telling everyone I'm only selling nasi lemak in Australia, and that is my full-time job. But as agree with Chu Wei as well, is that education has been a huge part, I would say, of the both country that's linked with each other. And I think education ongoing and long term will be bringing the country closer to each other because the culture has been quite multicultural in Australia as well. So education will be my point.
Yeah, thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And look, similar to Jian, I think from a business perspective, education has really driven the relationship. The vast majority of my clients who have a Malaysian background and operating businesses here in Melbourne largely started with coming here for university, and they've enjoyed their experience so much that they've chosen to stay permanently. Most of my clients would have studied either in high school or at university here in Melbourne and have stayed.
Cool. And Natasha, being a younger member of the panel?
I agree with Chiwei, but I also say yes to coming to Australia mainly because of Australian Open. That's one of the main reasons I'm here. But yeah, the being easy to fly 8 hours is one of the reasons I think, and the cost of living here is not too bad if you compare to Malaysia and all the other countries that, as Chiwei mentioned, like UK or US. So. Yeah.
I think, Natasha, you're a Rafa Nadal fan, are you, rather than Nicola?
No, I'm the Joker fan.
Oh, Joker, that's right. Yeah, no, very good. Well,
controversial.
That's another story for another hour, another time. It was interesting. Andrew and I were in Penang, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago. Andrew met a very well-known businessman in Penang. He's got a well-known brand right through Malaysia, and he started at Baldwin High School, which is about 500 metres behind me here in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne in 1960-something. And that would have been the outskirts of Melbourne back in those days. And he tells his story about both his son and daughter who did tertiary education here in Australia. Both are still residing in Malaysia, run businesses in Australia. And his 2 granddaughters, Andrew, were studying at the secondary school here at the time as well. So
that's right.
There's 3 generations of connectivity, which is just, I think, underpins those relationships, and they become intergenerational, which is quite fantastic. That's great. Thank you. We might start a couple of questions with Andrew. So, Andrew, a pitcher partner selected Malaysia as ground zero, I guess, in the ASEAN strategy. If we take China out of the mix and India out of the mix in terms of an Australian perspective, we're 25 million people. There's 600 million people ignoring China and India on our doorstep. And I think the pitcher partners recognise the importance of engaging better with the ASEAN countries. You chose Malaysia. Do you want to explain that, please?
Yeah, sure. Look, to a large extent, Malaysia chose us as well. Certainly talking to my colleagues in Sydney and Brisbane, they don't see nearly the same extent of inbound investment from Malaysia into their cities. Malaysians have very much chosen Melbourne, and I think, again, as I was saying before, driven by the education and the experience they've had there. But look, Malaysia, just generally speaking, has been an easy place for us to do business. They're very welcoming, and a lot of professional services firms had very much focus on China and Singapore. And if you did venture into those cities, there was comments around, fatigue around every advisor's meeting with them, and they kind of had enough. Whereas in Malaysia, they were always welcoming, keen to meet us, and we're appreciative of the time we spent coming to visit them. So it became very clear within the first couple of visits that our focus shouldn't be on Singapore or mainland China, and very much on Malaysia, and it's worked out really well for us.
I remember one of our first meetings with the OCBC representatives in Kuala Lumpur, and we've gone across a little bit naive in terms of understanding business and relationships in Malaysia, and the 2 bankers come out of the lift doors, and we welcome them and think this could be a hard conversation. And he sticks one of the bankers sticks his hand out and says, shakes my hand and says, "Hi, I'm Sam. I studied at Swinburne and I barracked for North Melbourne." And it was just such an easy conversation after that, North Melbourne being a Australian rules football team here in Melbourne, and that connection was just there. It was just easy. I mean, Malaysians also drive on the left-hand side of the road, which is handy. the old Commonwealth.
Not that we'd attempt to drive over in Malaysia, that's for sure. Especially not in KL, maybe Penang.
No, that's absolutely right. So you're working with a number of Malaysian clients, investing and operating in Melbourne. What's the general nature of these clients and relationships and businesses they're in?
Yeah, look, it's probably quite diverse. There's probably two main categories. I've got a number of listed groups, such as Sunrise, and OSK is another client of mine, who are very corporatized and structured in the way they do things. But there's also a number of private family groups. And again, it's been driven by education. The next generation might have studied here in Melbourne, and they're now governed with the task of growing the family business outside of Malaysia, and they're tending to choose Melbourne. So I probably have 6 or 7 private family groups starting up businesses here in Melbourne, largely centered around property. I think that's certainly an area that Malaysia has a real strength in, and property development in particular. And as I said before, really it's off the back of the next generation studying here in Melbourne and wanting to stay here and build a business and build a family and grow the family wealth for the next generation. So they're the two broad categories I have within my client base.
And in terms of the skyline behind you in the Melbourne CBD, some of the buildings you've been involved with, and it's always very rewarding when you've got 3 young sons, but you drive around and you talk about the projects you've got a lot of working with. So what are some of the iconic buildings you've been involved with?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned before, the Sunrise has done a couple of major projects here in Melbourne in the Central Business District, obviously Aurora, which I think is still the largest building in the Melbourne CBD. Is that right, Chi Wei? Or hasn't been replaced? No, that's good.
And yeah.
Yeah, and Conservatory just down the road. You probably can't see with my fake background here, but there's a large building outside my window that's just being built at the moment called the Beyonce Building, that's actually done by a Singaporean group, but with investments in Malaysia. As I said before, OSK has got their Melbourne Square project, which is 5 different buildings, which will be delivered over a 10-year period. I look after a number of hotel groups from Penang, or one in particular from Penang that has 5 or 6 hotels here in Melbourne. And look, really, that's one of the reasons I chose property. It's something you can see and walk through and watch grow over time, as opposed to just being numbers on a page. It's actually tangible. So it's great to be able to walk past these major projects and see them evolve over time. My team, every year we have an annual trip around Melbourne, taking photos outside all our client sites, and we can just look at the buildings evolve and grow over time. We're doing that for about 10 years now, so it's been great to watch that unfold.
I think in terms of cultural alignment, I think one thing that's very similar between the two countries is that it's built on relationship, not on transactions. And I know that when we first went to Malaysia and we're doing a couple of seminars, the first 2 times we went, it was very standoffish, if you like. And I don't think after the second presentation that the Malaysians fully embraced us yet. They didn't trust us yet, which was fair enough. But when we did the third presentation, and we're there probably 3 times in 6 months, weren't we, Andrew? Suddenly the business cards started to swap and those sorts of things, and we started to have cups of coffee and go for lunches. And so how did you invest in those relationships physically and mentally? How did you go about doing that and building those personal relationships?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was great fun. I think it's coming up on 10 years next month.
I tell your partners it was great fun.
That's right. No, it was hard work. We did the hard yards. No, but it was investing time-wise. It wasn't much of an effort when you can jump on a plane, similar time zone, and head across for a few days. And look, most of the meetings we had initially were in restaurants and hotels. And as you said before, it was very much about building the relationship, and the style of Australians and Malaysians is about doing business with friends and a longer term relationship. Certainly very different to other parts of the world where business relationships are very much transactional. So to be able to spend time with clients talking about their businesses and their plans for Australia. Obviously, it's great to be involved with entrepreneurial groups that are looking to explore new regions and grow their business. Is always great to have that conversation with people. So look, in the early days, I was probably over there every second month for probably the first year. and actually didn't result in any business at all in that first year. It was simply around understanding what the clients were looking for and where they needed assistance, and giving them that confidence to invest. But certainly after that first year, quite right, things really progressed quite quickly, built quite a bit of momentum after that first year, and never looked back.
An unexpected outcome of those visits was the Pitcher Partners Malaysia graduate program that came out with Khazanah Nasional, which I still think is a unique program. I don't think anybody else is doing that in Australia. Do you want a bit of background about that as well and how that's going?
Yeah, sure. No, look, that's been in place now for, I'd say, 5 or 6 years. And as I said, started out with Khazanah. It's just recently switched to UEM Group. And we hire anywhere between 2 to 5 graduates from Malaysia every year, really to be inducted into our graduate program here in Melbourne. So they're treated like any other graduate here in Pitcher Partners in Melbourne. And they spend 4 years with us. So they go right through their Institute of Chartered Accountant Studies and get all the support and training from us to become a fully qualified chartered accountant here in Australia. Obviously work with our clients and experience doing business in Australia with a view that after 4 years they can return home to Malaysia and work in one of the many Khazanah or UEM Group subsidiaries. So that's been a great program for us. Obviously trying to attract talent is always a very difficult prospect, especially in the current market. So to be able to access some of the best graduates in Malaysia and have them in our office for 4 years working with us and working on our clients has been a real benefit to us. And it's been great for our staff as well to learn about different cultures and work with different people and understand how different parts of the world do business. So obviously I won't steal Tasha's thunder on the whole program and how that works, but certainly from an employer perspective, it's been a great initiative and certainly one we continue with.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know from my perspective, not only meeting the graduates, but also their parents, their siblings, and they're building those sort of relationships. And notwithstanding COVID, I made a few dinners and lunches when I head across to Kuala Lumpur eventually, when things open up properly again. But it's been a very rewarding beyond our expectations in terms of how that would go. I might just ask Jian and Jian, in terms of the war for talent at the moment, from Andrew's comments, is there anything to add regarding how you're accessing your talent, whether it be through the Australian graduate pool, or are you looking offshore as well for some talent, or even beyond that?
I'll let Jian answer first.
Thank you. I think for Young Sunrise, it's more about us sending talents from Malaysia and to give the pool of Malaysians the opportunity to get international exposure and international experience. Yeah. So we have a team of 6 people here. All of us are Malaysians.
Fantastic.
Yep. For ST Group itself, we don't do offshore hiring. A lot of, I would say, floor staff to office itself. Generally, we do prefer to hire like a fresh graduate Malaysian. So we do provide a lot of, I would say, students, their first job as an intern or work in a restaurant or full-time in the office as well. And many of them share the same similarity, which is accounting background.
Fantastic. I think for the when the students do get back here and it's back to some more normality regarding international students, I'm sure those work pathways through retail and restaurants would be very valuable for them, plus a little bit of money in their pocket as well, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Final question, Andrew, on this topic. So I understand at least 3 of the graduates have gone back to work with Khazanah and part of that part of the government network over there. How are we going to stay in touch with that alumni? How are we going to leverage that going forward as well?
Yeah, well, obviously, now that we were able to travel again, catching up in person will be great to be able to do. They only returned home probably about 6 months ago, and now with the borders open, we'll aim to catch up with them all in person. I mean, now obviously with technology, that gives us a bit of an advantage. Even just simple things like we've set up a WhatsApp group and we keep in touch, communicating with each other on a regular basis. And I'm not the only one from Pitcher Partners who will travel back to Malaysia on a regular basis. Some of my team will be as well. So we'll keep in touch with them, and you never know, we might be doing business with them at some point in the future.
Thanks, Andrew. And Natasha, so you're one of the inaugural Malaysian graduates that came over in the program back in 2017. What's the experience been like for you over the last 4 or 5 years?
Well, considering I'm still here, it's been pretty good. I think it's pretty scary at the start of it, but now that I'm here, I realized that it's good for my career growth and also for my personal and development. Learning how things are done here work-wise and the work culture. There's a work-life balance because I worked in an accounting firm in Malaysia before I came here. It's very different how we do things here in comparison to Malaysia. I think it's good to get the exposure elsewhere outside of my home country and bring the good things that I learned here back home. People here are also very welcoming, so that it made it a lot easier for me to transition here. I say it's been a smooth sailing from my end.
And we talk about cultural alignment and similarities between, I guess, Malaysians and Australians. You're pretty open in conversations with us over the journey. What are some of the strangest things you found or surprising things about Australians?
3.
Or whatever.
Could be more. The accent, that's probably top in my list. The accent, all the slangs that you use, I probably still don't get most of it. Like, I shout, yeah. That was the first thing I learned when I came to Australia. And all the short forms that you do at the end of every word. Kappa, like my name, somehow Natasha is not okay. It has to be short or Tash. Just everything has to be short. That's one. Coffee culture, it's pretty big here. Didn't realize how much coffee a person can drink until I came to Australia. And the multicultural. I noticed that Australia tend to love Asian food more than chicken parma, if you call it a national Australian dish. Maybe that's why SD Group is doing so well, because Australians just love Malaysian food and all the other Asian food. That's the 3 things that I wasn't expecting.
Andrew spoke about diversity as well, and we talk about gender diversity, we can talk about racial diversity, religious diversity, those sorts of things. But what I think all that wrapped up is the cognitive diversity that you and your fellow graduates are brought into a firm like Pitcher Partners, the way of thinking, and we've got to be wary. And I think at times we assume that we are more similar than what we are, and we have to be a little bit patient. One of the groups that came in, I bought them a DVD of an iconic Australian movie called The Castle. I don't know if Chi Wei and Jian, you know The Castle. So in Australia, it's an iconic comedy which a lot of the language and it's become part of the lexicon of Australians. We use a lot of the language from that movie. So I bought the DVD for the Malaysian graduates, and they didn't laugh. And so there is a little bit of a sense of humour difference between the 2 cultures. I'm still shattered about that, Natasha, but anyway, I'll move on.
I wonder if Chi Wei thinks it's funny if you did watch it, because I don't think it was funny at all.
That was my induction coming into Australia. I have to watch The Castle.
Did you laugh?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was quite fun.
Maybe it's a generation gap.
Yeah. Okay.
That's even worse. There's a tip for any of the people attending this webinar, is to get a copy or download the Castle and watch that as part of your learning the Australian culture. Natasha, in terms of, obviously you said you're a little bit nervous coming to Melbourne. It's obviously a big change in your life. In terms of those people watching this webinar and thinking about maybe coming to study offshore, any tips for them in terms of how they might go about that, or how they might make that decision?
I think if the opportunity comes and you have the means and the chance to go, I say do it. There's obviously challenges regardless where you end up being. If you decide to go to any other countries, there will always be its challenges. So don't be scared. If the challenge is that you'll be far away from your family, you can always fly back. There's video calls. If you're scared of being independent, well, you have to end up being an adult soon. So it's sort of challenging yourself, and it's very rewarding knowing that you can do it by yourself. You have friends here if you ever feel alone. So I feel like all the little things that you think might stop you or prevent you from making the move, those things can be resolved no matter where you decide to go. So even in Malaysia itself, there's always challenges, right? So just if the opportunity comes, I say grab it and do it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for that. Chi-Wei, UEM Sunrise. So could you please just provide a bit more background about what you're doing, UEM Sunrise is doing in Australia and Melbourne, and your role as director?
Sure. So UEM Sunrise is a public listed company based in Malaysia. Our ultimate parent company, the majority shareholder is Khazanah. So it's the government sovereign fund of Malaysia. So I just realized there's a little bit of connection even between the two of our panelists here. And of course, Papa Rich just had dinner at Papa Rich yesterday. So again, that connection of how close I think the Malaysian community is really here in Melbourne. So we started here in Australia in 2013. That was when we bought our first property development site here. So since then, we have completed 2 projects here in Melbourne, and we are working on our fourth project now. My role here, I look after all the UEM Sunrise Australians business in Australia. So starting from the beginning, looking at sites, getting projects developed, getting consultants on board, doing property development, getting projects built, selling it to house owners, getting that completed, handing it over to the buyers, handling all their grievances or their happiness, or being at getting their feedback about the products that we develop. Yeah, that's the sort of scope that we do here.
And your personal pathway to Melbourne, so you studied Masters at Greenwich University in London. How was your pathway to Melbourne? How did that come about?
It came through work, essentially. So I studied in London for about 2 years. I then had the opportunity to work in Singapore for a couple of years. And I had the opportunity to be sent here to do our projects here in Melbourne. So I've stayed a fair bit, in different cities around the world. I still think Melbourne is the best place to live. I mean, you go to London, that's fine. You go on a holiday, that's nice for a while. You study, that's all right. But I mean, essentially in Melbourne, I think there is a better work-life balance here in Australia. You tend to also take care of yourself better when you are here. And essentially, and because public transport is good, you get, parks and gardens in the city, you take a short walk away. Everything is just very convenient. You don't have to essentially spend like 45 minutes driving to get to your office and then another 45 minutes back. So the lifestyle is definitely much better. Yeah, I mean, even compared to Singapore, even compared to London, this is still, I think, the top place to come to live, and you just settle down here.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great to hear. We had a bit of a laugh before the session started about Malaysian time. So when you're just saying that when Andrew and I were first in Malaysia, we were panicking about running late to meetings. But so now you've been in Melbourne for quite a while. How's your time? Are you punctual?
I think I'm getting better at it.
Very good. What's UEM Sunrise's view on property investment in Australia? You've got what's your outlook in terms of as Melbourne as a destiny for foreign investment still?
I think Melbourne and generally in Australia has got very strong, very good fundamentals for property development, healthy population growth. There is still a top destination for education. And also, I think generally for Malaysians, Australia has the reputation of being a very transparent country. So when you do business, your concern is always, if you bring money in for investment, do you get to bring the money out of Australia, or is it going to be difficult? In fact, I think bringing money out of Australia is easier than bringing money out of Malaysia into Australia, because you need to get approval from the central government back in Malaysia. Yeah, so it is a transparent country. The legal system is established, so we have confidence about how, as in the governance of the country, and of course the land law. Being a Commonwealth country, the Malaysia and Australia is similar. So there is that sense of familiarity as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And as an employer, what do you look for in a graduate starting in terms of their characteristics, their capabilities, those sorts of things?
I think we look for, I suppose, talents that are able to enrich our culture. So it's not so much about getting people who has got good cultural fit to the company, but looking for somebody who's able to enrich and enhance the culture that the company already has. So that's how we progressively move forward, change ourselves, be a bit more flexible, be a bit quicker in our response to how the market changes.
Fantastic. And from a career development perspective, would you recommend that people work in more than one jurisdiction and maybe travel around a bit before they find their place?
Yeah, I think you should always be open and flexible. If you get to study in one country, maybe try working in another, before you decide where you want to settle down. If you have the opportunity, I think like what Natasha said, if you have the opportunity, you have the means to do so. It is good to have a target or a destination, but you can take different paths to get there. Just keep your options open. I mean, if you are young, just go all out.
Yeah, it's always surprising on how we all get together and become part of one community, given the various backgrounds that we've had, which have been come together and converged over time. So thank you, Jian. So ST Group. So I understand you were there from day one with Mr. Sortat Gee in terms of setting up from one shop to now 142 restaurants across 9 brands in 3 countries. One of the great entrepreneurial stories anywhere. So it's a fantastic achievement. Congratulations to you and the ST Group. Can you please talk a little bit about ST Group and what you're up to at the moment?
Thanks, Michael. Probably instead of ST Group, we bring it back to Papa Rich. So we started Papa Rich in 2012, and it's a very simple thing due to the fact that we miss the Malaysian food and our culture. So back in 2012, when we started the first store, and we were considered lucky that there was a craze of Malaysian food in Australia, where the market is opening up to a fast casual dining. And when we did Papa Rich in 2012, within 3 years, we have established close to 15 stores in Australia. From there on, we thought about, hang on, there's a huge demand of, I would say, good Asian franchise brand in Australia. So why don't we look into this direction? And that is where ST Group was born. We created ST Group as a management company to operate multiple franchise brand in Australia. Started off strongly in Australia. We moved towards to New Zealand. And from New Zealand onwards, we've moved towards to England, including a brand like Gong Cha, the bubble tea in England as well. So yeah, over the years, 8 to 9 brands and ongoing, ST Group aim is always to bring in different franchise brand from other Asian country into Australia, New Zealand, and England.
Yeah, fantastic. So the connection with the Malaysian culture and the DNA, I guess, how important has that been? And how do you maintain that when you're entering Australia, New Zealand, and into the UK?
I would say it's not an easy thing. We will talk back about culture. To introduce a Malaysian food in Australia, I would say it's pretty tough due to the fact that the hardest critic of Malaysian food will always be Malaysian. Yeah, so that's not an easy task. But what our aim to integrate the culture is more about letting everyone know that. Going back to your question about is Penang or KL, which places have the better laksa itself? I would say same and different. It does depend on your taste. So for us to integrate the culture over here, it's more about being a Malaysian, understanding the way Australians do things, and at the same time, in ourselves, we have the word called, in Malay, we call it boleh land, which means that everything is possible as long as you put your heart and soul into it. So taking a bit of our culture, working hard, it's not just a 9 to 5 thing. While we treasure work-life balance, but we do work hard in order to achieve what we want and to be successful in Australia. So I would say partially a link back on the way we are being brought up in Malaysia.
Fantastic. And was there anything you had to change at all? Or did Australians really embrace what your offering was?
Yes, we do. So by introducing the Papa Rich over in Australia, you will notice that some of our food are less spicy and a bit sweeter on the side as well. So that's actually what we try to make certain changes to ensure that the local Australian will be able to accept our food easier.
Fantastic. And Natasha, any thoughts on that? Are you happy with the Papa Rich offering? And interesting, at Pitcher Partners are based above Southern Cross Station here in Melbourne, and there's a Papa Rich at Southern Cross Station. So that's often when you're walking past, you'll see a number of Pitcher Partners staff in there.
Yeah.
Natasha?
Not going to complain. I used to buy the nasi lemak bungkus for breakfast and have it with the other Malaysian grads for breakfast.
Oh, thanks.
So not going to complain. I love that it's very close to the office. Convenient.
Yeah, great support. And so from an entrepreneurial viewpoint, Jian, we've spoken a bit about studying and careers and things, but for those Malaysians wanting to start businesses, what's the opportunities do you see for those who have really got some get up and go and can either bring in some of the ideas from Malaysia or have their own creativity and innovation here in Melbourne? The ability to start businesses, it's a good place to start business.
Going back to what Andrew mentioned about continuing the generation, yeah, we did talk about a lot of Malaysians would like to bring their business, be it in property, retail, or hospitality, to start their business in Australia. Definitely, a lot of I would say Asian would think that Australia is a good pathway to enter into the Western market. Yeah, as a good trial as well. So look, I did speak to a lot of parties. It's not as simple as you think. It is to start a business in Australia. Do your research come to the country, experience it for a couple of months before you decide whether it is the right fit of your business. However, what Chiwe has mentioned is that the regulation, transparency in Australia, I would say it's a very, very good place to start a business in a Western country.
Fantastic. That's great to hear such glowing endorsements of what we're doing here in Australia. And I know from Andrew and my perspective, we've always found the same. We've gone into Malaysia as well. So it is a two-way thing. You can just see the passion on both sides, which is tremendous. A question for all the panel. First question would be, why should Malaysians study in Australia? You might unpack that a bit further. And if you were working for Study Melbourne, what would be the one-line promotion tagline would you choose for attracting Malaysian students to Australia? That's a tough one, but I might start with you, Andrew. What do you think in terms of why should they come here, and then what's the tagline?
Look, yeah. So I guess probably why they should come here. I guess if they're looking for a longer-term career within Australia, I think probably Melbourne's the place to be. As I said before, we're seeing inbound investment into Melbourne to a much greater extent than other capital cities throughout Australia. So having that connection is really useful. I mean, I certainly see with my clients, just the local Malaysian community is really quite a close-knit community. They're always networking together and holding events together and socialising. And so to have that Malaysian background is a real advantage in doing business here in Melbourne, probably much more so than other major cities within Australia.
You have a tagline for the Victorian government?
Look, putting an accountant under pressure here, it's we'll have to leave that to someone else in the marketing team, I think. Okay,
I'll come back to you later on. Natasha, well, you've probably mentioned there. Anything else to add in terms of encouraging or promoting Melbourne as a destination for Malaysian students?
I'd probably just say from my own experience, I have a lot of friends here that are student. They're studying and they are not under any scholarship or anything. And if I just wanted to put it out there, if it's the cost that you guys are worried about, the part-time jobs here, they pay you pretty decent. And the cost of living, rental and everything, it's you can manage it. So just want to put it out there if that's what you're concerned about. I've got a tagline, but it's going to be in Malay.
That's good.
I was going to say, Malaysia boleh, Melbourne boleh. I hope I didn't steal anyone's tagline. Which means Malaysia boleh is like Malaysians can do anything, basically. And Melbourne boleh means Melbournes can do anything. So Malaysians in Melbourne, you can do anything.
We'll just keep that amongst ourselves. We might package that up and sell that to the Victorian government, and we'll we'll share in the proceeds. How about that?
Yeah, I will charge a percentage of it
Yeah.
if they end up using it.
I think you've nailed it. Chiwei, anything to add in terms of Malaysians encouraging them to come across to Melbourne?
Yeah, I think just building on what Natasha said, just in relation to, I think, the entry cost. I mean, if you're looking at going into a Western country, again, let me say, you know, Western nation, for instance. So I think Melbourne, just in comparison to other key cities like in London or any part of the States, even Singapore, it still has a relatively lower entry cost. So cost of living is actually lower. Even the first thing we look at as a Malaysian is the conversion rate, the foreign currency exchange rate. So Australian dollars is like 3, maybe slightly more, but it's definitely much better than, you know, pounds or even US dollars. So it is still more affordable, but it gives you that opportunity to have a good access to education and a better lifestyle.
Fantastic. And Jian?
Yep. Well, being a student over here, I've experienced the ups and downs. But overall, it's been very positive. Like what Tasha have said as well, is that coming over to Australia itself, as a student, you have a very strong community and friends. Getting a job won't be difficult. We pay very well as well for students who are working in Australia. So definitely you will be able to manage or I would say afford the living over here. But if you were to ask me a tagline, I would probably say feels like home, mate.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I think we've solved a problem there. So that was a prompted question that came from the attendees. So that may have been someone from Study Melbourne asking for your views. So I think we've nailed it. Well done. At the end of the seminar or the webinar today, we'll provide a number of email addresses and support services details to the attendees. So further to the conversation just then, Global Vic, Study Melbourne, vic.com.au. In terms of all the support services that are available to Malaysians studying in Melbourne, and that's legal services, there's events, there's mentoring, access to, again, diaspora in terms of relationships. So there is a lot of support here, and also through the universities as well. I think all the universities have a Malaysian group within their universities as well, and because of the number of students, it's obviously a lot of fun, a great breadth of network there as well. One thing I wanted to ask was that we haven't mentioned COVID much, thankfully, and that's hopefully behind us. I know it's been a terrible time in Malaysia, more so than probably Australia. I mean, in terms of the impact, although in Australia, in particularly Melbourne, we've had lockdowns and various other things. Putting that behind us now, I might just get run through the panel. In terms of a post-pandemic outlook, what it might mean for the Australian-Malaysian relationship, and the other positives coming out of what has been a very difficult couple of years. Andrew, might start from you as well. Thank you.
I was certainly talking to my clients. I can sense a real pent-up demand. There's been a lot of frustration with borders being closed over the last 2 years, and to try to make transactions occur and investments occur, we really need to be working together physically in the same location. So talking to my clients who have been stuck in Malaysia for the last 2 years, they're very keen to come back to Melbourne and progress their business. So I can see that there might be a little bit of a boom coming over the next couple of years as we see more and more groups look to move into Melbourne. We're certainly hoping that's the case, and from the discussion so far, we're seeing people booking flights already and coming into Melbourne, really putting back in place plans they had 2 years ago pre-COVID that they haven't been able to implement. So I can see things are going to grow from strength to strength.
When are you going back to KL? When's your next visit?
Probably September, I think. I'll be back there. Yeah, so try to get back there, probably a full 2-week trip this time just to catch up with everyone. Normally it's just 1 week. I think given I haven't been able to catch up with any of my clients or contacts in 2 years, we'll make it a 2-week trip. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'd be great. And we always, when we'd travel overnight and sleep on the plane and arrive for our first meeting at 9. So the time differences really do facilitate ease of doing business between the two jurisdictions as well, which is great. Natasha, from your perspective, post-COVID, how do you see things panning out? I mean, Natasha's been in Melbourne now for over 5 years. Because of COVID, couldn't go home the last couple of years. So it was extended and worked well, and Kazana National's been fantastic as well in terms of support and working collaboratively with the firm. but you've been here a couple of years extra, which has been great for Pitcher Partners and hopefully great for you. What are your thoughts going forward?
Yeah, I agree with Andrew. As soon as the border starts opening up, I know there's a lot of people coming in and leaving the country to visit the family and friends and all the loved ones, not just from Malaysia, from all over the country. So I only expect that the economy is going to get better post-COVID, and the relationship would just be better now that everyone can travel and see each other face to face again.
And thank you, Natasha. And Chi Wei, from your perspective, Summarise's outlook's been pretty positive, but have you pivoted at all in terms of investment strategies and what you might thought you might have been doing 2 years ago, and something might have changed?
I think the confidence is still there. In fact, if you look at the property market, I think the sentiment has gone back to pre-pandemic level even better. For us, it's not so much a change in business strategy, but in building the homes or the apartments we look at, it's about how we cater to the changing lifestyle, taking into consideration the pandemic.
Yep. And what sort of lifestyle changes do you see from that? What are some of the things in terms of the built form of what you're doing might change?
It's more about the internal space planning. So if in the event you need to work from home, I think more of the companies now are looking at potentially allowing employees to work more from home, a flexible working arrangement, say maybe 2 out of 5 days, or maybe 1 out of 5 days in a week that you're allowed to work from home. So it's about designing, say, an apartment. If it is a compact 1-bedroom, for instance, how do you make working from home more comfortable? So it can be probably in the sense of like flexible layout. We have sliding panels that you can just, cordon off part of your bedroom as a study room, for instance. So there's sort of little tweaks and changes, but it makes, that's part of the lifestyle change. It's how we incorporate into our apartment design now. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot to think about, isn't there? It's certainly been a great change in the world we knew 2 years ago. And Jian, from your perspective, people still eat the same volumes, but I guess there'd be other changes in terms of the way you manage your food and resources and all the supply chains.
Look, supply chain has definitely been difficult, and it's still going to be difficult as well due to the current market changes. But in regards to the restaurant operation, definitely a lot more digital of how we have been operating, from mobile order to self-ordering kiosk, a huge drive towards, I would say, digital side of things.
Fantastic. I'm not sure if Penny Holloway's there from Outcome.Life. We were going to have a couple of questions from the Study Melbourne Hub. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Penny, any questions from the Hub?
Sure am. Does the Study Melbourne Hub have anything to contribute to this convo? They can unmute themselves if so.
We've got a few minutes left, but no?
Perhaps not, it's all right.
Yeah. So we'll continue on. So a couple of final questions in, and just probably a few more tips, I guess, in terms of those that are watching, from whether it's thinking about undergraduate study, postgraduate study, career management, those sorts of things. We might start with career management. Again, just run around the panel. Any tips, Andrew, from career management, from a perspective of cross-border as well?
Yeah, look, I think probably a couple of the panelists have mentioned it before, but it's really just looking to take a bit of a chance, take a bit of an opportunity as it comes along. It's certainly something as employers we look at. People's technical skills are a given once they've got a degree, and you can see that through the university results. But what we're looking for is people who are willing to extend themselves, take a bit of a risk outside their comfort zone, and explore something new. It demonstrates a real growth mindset. So as opportunities arise to study overseas, as a number of our panelists have said, it's really, I think, something that people should seriously consider.
And Chi Wei and Jian, in terms of mentors, for those younger people coming through their careers, in terms of their confidence in reaching out to some more senior people, and again, through the diaspora, but also through people like Andrew and others around the place, in terms of that mentoring piece and just reaching out and asking questions, and how would you encourage them to do that?
Yeah, I think it is important to be able to speak to people who has gone through the same experience before. I mean, as a business, as we come here, you need advice of local experts. So, with Future Partners, we get the guidance that we need as a new business coming into a new market. So it's important to know who to get your advice from, speak to people who has gone through the same thing before and just learn from the experience. But again, I think it's also about, taking a leap of faith. Just, keep your options open. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Jian?
I think when it comes to mentoring and stuff itself, I think is to take the first step to ask the question instead of holding back. So as we have discussed about it, Melbourne or Australia has been known to be very transparent, open. People over here are willing to share. You walk into 7-Eleven, they will say, "Hi, how are you doing?" You walk into a lift, your neighbor will say, "Hi, mate." So it's been a very open country, and so do not be afraid to ask the question or meet someone new. It is very important to take the first step.
And Natasha, there's something you consider in terms of the early stages of your career, mentoring and or the mentees that you seek out, and how you would go about that?
Yeah, like I mentioned previously, everyone has been very welcoming. I didn't have to feel shy or scared to ask any questions or feeling like I sound dumb or anything. Doesn't matter who I approached to, everyone was more than willing to help me. And it doesn't have to be my own personal manager. Everyone in general, whether it's like Jian mentioned, whether I'm going to shopping or getting directions, or everyone's pretty welcoming and helpful.
And you found that being quite similar between Melbourne and Malaysia?
Work-wise, I probably felt pretty shy and a little bit scared to ask questions back home. Just because of the culture is that you figure things out on your own first. And then when you really, really, really don't know, then you ask. But here, if I sit down 15 minutes, I'm definitely not going to get the answer. The next 15 minutes, I'm just going to ask.
How did you find that flicking that switch and then changing? That's obviously a cultural significance in terms of the way you were brought up and experience things in Malaysia. How did you just flick that switch? And you've been very successful since you've been in Melbourne, so you've obviously been able to adapt. So how did you do that?
I guess just try to read the room and embrace the culture here. It's not the same as it is in Malaysia. So just try to fit in and then just trust the people and trust the process. I mean, if they're offering help, they really want to help, then just try. And then if I get the feedback that I want or the outcome that I want, then that means I'm doing it right. So yeah.
And I think it does again come back to relationships, and that we do this for a long time, and it's very rewarding for people my age to see talented young people like you, Natasha, be so successful so early in your career. And we know we're going to be watching you and those others that have gone back to Malaysia. They'll be in very, very senior leadership positions over the next 20 years. And it'll be great to see you flourish and have such an impact, whether it's there or here. So it's certainly a wonderful thing. And I think, that just to finish off on that point, the cultural alignment there between Malaysia and Australia, that we do play a long game around relationships, which I think is really very good. Look, to wrap up, it's almost, the hour's almost gone, so it's gone very quickly. Look, I really appreciate, and I know that for everyone watching and for the panelists to be so willing to provide your time. I know how busy you all are. It's wonderful that we make one phone call and you're so willing to be involved and be engaged. And it's been like talking across the lounge room with you. It's just been very relaxed, and it's been wonderful to have that conversation. And I have no doubt it's going to have added a lot of value to those watching. Thank you to our sponsors, Outcome.Life and Study Melbourne. And I do again encourage all those people attending to really have a look at the Study Melbourne websites. And again, those domains and web addresses will be shared with you. And we certainly look forward to building new relationships with those coming to Melbourne to study or to develop their careers, or even to start businesses such as the people we have here today that have demonstrated the capabilities here in Melbourne. So thank you very much. We wish you all the best. Enjoy the rest of your day and take care. And Natasha, the final word, what was the slogan again?
Malaysia boleh, Melbourne boleh.
And Jian?
Do you want to try and say it?
Feels like
Jian?
home, mate.
Perfect.
Let's go with Jian one. It's easier.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.